Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Magandang tanghali. Kia ora and good afternoon to everyone. So, welcome to our Buwan ng Wika online forum, and we are very proud to present to you an afternoon of hopefully a lively discussion about the importance of language, especially in migrant communities, Filipino migrant communities everywhere in the world. But for today here here in New Zealand. So for today, we'd like to August is an important month for the Filipino community everywhere in the world, and because it's the month when we celebrate our national language, and which was first established in 1946 under a Quezon-led government. Originally, it was celebrated as a week-long commemoration of the Filipino language, but later on, it was changed to a whole month of observation of Filipino of our national language under the term of Ramos, but it's when we moved to a Buwan ng Wika observation. And then later on, we also recognized, particularly in 2019, we also recognized other indigenous languages as part of the celebration of Buwan ng Wika. And if you didn't know, we have so why do we celebrate Buwan ng Wika? It's to celebrate Filipino history, to recognize the role of language in arts and culture, and to appreciate multilingualism and diversity. And I think behind these three main reasons for celebrating Buwan ng Wika. It's we will find that it's community that makes it makes this all work, and it's through community that we are able to celebrate our language, our heritage, our roots. Especially now that we are living elsewhere in the world. Before I forget, I'd like to go back. This event is not, it's not going to be possible without the support of our sponsors, mainly Orbit Remit, Aroha New Zealand Immigration Services, and also our funder, Ministry of Ethnic Communities. So thank you to these companies and organizations who continue to support our events and our activities. So if you didn't know, the Philippines has over 100 languages. So depending on how language which study you follow, it's between 100 and 130 and 195. So before, like when I was younger, we recognized this as dialects, but eventually we actually studies actually showed that these are distinct languages with their own nuances and their own grammar and specific ways of using the language. So in every region of the Philippines, you'll find that different people speak multiple languages, and it's not uncommon that a Filipino child or a Filipino person can speak more than one language there. So yeah. So I think a question for the people who have joined the forum today is, if you are from the Philippines, how many languages do you speak? You can write your comment on the comment section. I just wanted to get a gauge of how many people can speak two languages or more than, or three languages or more, because I myself, I can speak um two languages fluently in Filipino. Well, Filipino languages, so that's Tagalog and Ilocano, and of course English, which is also an official language in the Philippines. Um, so yeah, and if you have kids, do your kids speak more than one language as well? 1937. Okay. um, okay, so we are just we were supposed to start with Jan for the talk today, but she has not joined yet. So we will start with Jade, who will um who will be speaking about celebrations of um or bringing communities together through celebrations of language, culture, and tradition. So we are very pleased to have Jade with us today, because she's not only a prominent community uh, icon, especially in the Auckland community, um, but she's also a partner of Banyuhay Aotearoa, and she's currently a brand and marketing specialist, specializing in search engine optimization and content strategy. She is the founder of Filipino Children's Library, which runs a program to lend out books, games, and props to schools, hosting Filipino events. And the library also offers online storytelling to make these stories more accessible to Filipino children in New Zealand and around the world. She also owns Batang Pinoy NZ Events, which aims to create family-friendly events to help young Kiwi Filipino kids connect with their cultural roots. Her achievements include being awarded Poet of the Year at the first Nick Joaquin Literary Awards Asia Pacific in 2019, and the Filipino Kiwi Hero Awards very recently in 2024. So lastly, she's also New Zealand's first book fairy and the founder of Books on the Bus NZ. Let's welcome Jade, and we look forward to to your thoughts and ideas about bringing communities together through celebrations of language, culture, and tradition.
Thank you so much. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. So as Becky mentioned, I'm Jade. I'm the owner of Books on the Bus. A lot of things actually. Medyo busy ako sa life. So Batang Pinoy NZ, Filipino Children's Library. I also actually own Oyayi Filipino Bookstore, and we have over 100 titles for Filipino books. So when they asked me to put together something about bringing communities together through celebrations of language, culture, and tradition, I didn't know where to start with it. So I wanted today to be a little bit more personal, to talk about how our journey began and then where we are now. So we actually, when we started Batang Pinoy and the Filipino Children's Library, we had a very simple dream. We wanted to encourage the next generation of Filipino Kiwis to embrace their roots. Because a lot of kids here, they don't, including my own kid, they don't know how to speak the language anymore. We wanted to do this by introducing our Filipino songs, letting them dance our traditional dances like tinikling, and then we wanted them to play our Filipino games, yung mga sungka, sipa, and all that. We also wanted them to taste the different flavors of the Philippines, of our islands. We wanted to build Filipino language skills and inspire the younger children to learn Filipino. But most of all, what we wanted was them to learn to love our culture as much as we did growing up. So this is actually how the Filipino Children's Library and Batang Pinoy events were born. Can we go to the next slide? But before all that, it actually started with my own child. So I moved to New Zealand in 2015. Then my little girl was only 3 years old, so yan yung picture niya. She started talking earlier when before even going to New Zealand. She started talking when she was about a year old. So by 2 years old, she was already bilingual. She could understand and speak Filipino and English. When we decided to move to New Zealand, by the time she was 3 years old, I proactively decided to stop teaching her Filipino. In hindsight, I now know that this is actually a very bad decision that we made. My thinking back then was we wanted her to adjust fully to the New Zealand culture, to New Zealand school as well. So as time went on, by the time she was 6 years old, we discovered that she couldn't understand Filipino anymore and much less speak it. So by that time, I wanted to reteach the language to her, but it was a real struggle for me because there were we didn't have resources. So we went to the library to look for Filipino books for children. There was only very little of it out there. It's mostly other languages that they had, or cookbooks in Filipino, or even romance novels in Filipino, but not a lot of children's books for Filipino. So it was a big challenge for me dealing with that lack of resources. That's why I started the Filipino Children's Library. Next, please. So what happened was I actually approached then Ambassador Gary Domingo, who was stationed in New Zealand, and told him that I wanted to start a project of bringing Filipino books into New Zealand, specifically for younger children. So I went to the publishers in the Philippines because I've worked with them before in my former life there. I collected several books. A lot of them did contribute. So you can see books from Lampara, Adarna, Ilaw ng Tahanan. So a lot of those books of different varying age ranges. So books about our national heroes, books for children. Yung Itim na Kuting is a good one. And then I also got books that were more for the more advanced readers. So El Filibusterismo, No Limitangere. I got those types of books as well as dictionaries in Filipino. And then Amba Gary connected me to Knights of Rizal. Our purpose was really to distribute the books and make it like a roving library. So now, yung next portion naman, can we go to the next slide? It was a very effective way of doing it. Kaya lang, the pandemic happened, so we had to stop moving around the books. They're currently now stationed in Rosmini College, so it's sitting in their library. So they have a more extensive collection of Filipino books. But what I wanted to do was really just to continue that effort, so we went digital. Our goal was to make the stories available to our culture available through videos. This way, hindi lang sa New Zealand and not only to the Filipino migrant kids in New Zealand would benefit from it, but also kids in any part of the world. Because at that time, siguro early 2020s to, nauso yung mga online classes and everything. So I started doing online storytelling. I was recording the video. Sometimes I did it live over Zoom. And it wasn't just for my kid and my nieces and nephews. It started expanding, and we started growing the community from there. Next slide, please. And then, actually, I think a lot of us were surprised that the pandemic took longer than expected. We were actually expecting it to only last 6 or 7 months. It took almost 2 years before we could finally see people again in real life. So that's when we started planning our first New Zealand event. Because even before coming to New Zealand, I used to do events for children, like events for moms and babies. So I said that maybe this is something I could explore again. I put together Batang Pinoy, so it's a celebration of Filipino children in New Zealand. We took one hall in Western Springs. This is like mid-April. This was only last year that we did this. And then we had a very good program together. So I asked people like Donna Dacuno of Matatas to put together. So they did a live storytelling. It was really good because she had actors come in. They were in full costume doing pagong at matching. And then we also had groups like Samut Sari do a demonstration of tinikling. Tapos from there, it wasn't just learning how they showing them what to dance or how to dance at tinikling, but they actually made it more interactive, and then the kids were trying to learn how to do the tinikling themselves, which was really really fun. Then we had other parts of the program, like we asked Likhain to help us with a fashion show. So it was their very first fashion show featuring only children. And then ako naman, I took on the game. So I imported some of the sungka sets, and then we got all the parents involved. It was a really good outcome. We had about 100 families join, so we were just surprised with that. Because of that we decided to do two more events last year. So one was food festival, and for this one I wanted to focus more on not just Filipino food, but also the different festivals of the Philippines. So I got in touch with the Department of Tourism. They sent over magazines. I actually went home to the Philippines for a few weeks for this, just to source all of our props. So meron akong Gigantes na mini version, tapos meron akong giant mascara na 2 feet big. And then I also went and contacted people for the pahiyas, kasi kumuha ko ng mga pahiyas flowers, which were actually imported straight from the Quezon province. So all that, and then we printed some materials about what all those festivals were about. It was also very successful. Inulan kami nitong event na to, but even so, about 500 people came to that event. So this time, we weren't just doing Hall 1 in Western Springs, we did Hall 1 and 2. And then by November, we decided to do a Christmas one kasi syempre, we celebrate Christmas in such a unique way in the Philippines. We actually celebrate it for 4 months. I wanted to do an event that was more like the Noel Bazaars in the Philippines, just getting all the different business owners that are owned by Filipinos in Auckland together in one roof, under one roof, and then making it a big deal. So yeah, it was a really good one. That one was attended by about 700 people. We had really good feedback because we gave a lot of presents to the little kids, and we worked with a lot of sponsors, a lot of partners to make it a reality. So the next one, can we go to the next slide? So this year, so we were pretty successful last year at building the community and growing it slowly, event by event. So this year we wanted to take a different approach. What I did was I contacted Takapuna Beach Business Association, and then I told them that I wanted to do like a Flores de Mayo themed event. So we did this in May. It's called the Takapuna Filipino Festival, and they were really very good partners because they put up an entire billboard for us. They gave us access to newspapers and magazines to talk about what we're trying to do. So it's different because it's not just us building a community within New Zealand, the Filipino community, and growing it. But what we wanted to do was to really start introducing the Filipino culture to mainstream New Zealand. Because the Filipinos here, that we number about 70,000 across New Zealand, and in Auckland alone is about 40,000. We're the third biggest immigrant group in New Zealand. And we wanted people to have a better appreciation of our culture, our food, and our language. So this is the approach that we took. Next one, please. And then it was very well received. So that this is actually very unexpected. About 2,700 people attended that event. And it wasn't just all Filipinos. If you can see on the right side, that's one of the feedback from people who attended the event. So we got a lot of really good feedback. And it was such a successful event that when I talked to the Takapuna Business Association about that, they said they want to do it every year now. So next year you can look forward to another event like this again. Next one. And then the other part of it is we wanted to involve the community more in the events that we did. So what I did was I came up with the first Adobo Festival. So this is an exciting one. This just happened last month, so in June, oh, not 2 months ago, June 15th. So it was during the celebration of the Philippine Independence Day for the community. What I did was I put together, like, it's not a live cooking contest, but more of a taste testing contest. We asked like 9 contestants to join, so they were presenting the different types of adobo. So adobo as a national dish isn't just one recipe. There's hundreds of versions of it across the Philippines. So I wanted that to be well represented. So we had classic pork adobo, Kapampangan, Batangas adobo, adobong natural, which was like cooked just in salt, and it doesn't use vinegar or soy sauce. Adobo burger, so it's a very new version of adobo. Adobong matanda, which was a really nice version, which was cooked over fire. A humba version, adobong chini, which is a vegan version of adobo. There's also ilonggo version. So what I did was I had people taste test the different types, and then they voted on the winner. Nakakatawa nga kasi I did this with paper voting. So on the day, I had to count each vote manually. And then we also invited some chefs to join us. They scored it, and then we gave out 2 awards, which is the People's Choice Award and the Chef's Choice. And it was very surprising for me because the winner, trumping all of the pork and chicken adobo, was actually the vegan adobo version. Okay, so yeah. So those are the events that we had for the last year. Our North Star really is what guides us. When we were thinking about this while we were doing the presentation, was that it's really just, as a parent myself, as a migrant and as a Filipino, I think it's really on us to pass our culture on to our children because no one else would do this. So what we wanted to do was build a platform where we can do this for the version of younger generation of Filipinos growing up outside the Philippines. While it started with my own child, I'm really happy to see that the impact that we're making surpasses that, and it's affecting other families, other children, and even non-Filipinos. So as that with that, our commitment is to continue doing the events and to use this as a platform to educate the younger generation of Filipino Kiwis about our culture. We also wanted to bring the Filipino community in New Zealand together. So we want the events to be really interactive for them to engage with it better. And we want to start sharing our culture to the rest of New Zealand. Next, please. So what's next for the Filipino Children's Library? So as I said before, I also own Oyai Filipino Books. So now we have about 100 titles in our collection, and this is something that we continue to grow. It's a physical collection of books that we can lend to those who need it. We're also working with Auckland libraries now. So we're doing Filipino story time. I have one this month, also as part of the celebration of Buwan Wika, or Filipino Language Month. And we're also working with schools, lending them the resources that they need. So whether these be props like the ones you see there. So I actually hand painted that Jeep and that background, which is the Bahay Kubo. We let them borrow our props, our books, and anything else that they need. So sometimes they just need a little bit of help with the program. So that's something that we can do for them. And next one. For Batang Pinoy naman, what we're doing is we're collaborating with other groups. We're actually starting our Filipino market at the end of this month on the 24th. It's going to be at East Auckland, where what we're trying to do is get the best of Filipino merchants and then tour them around Auckland. So it's going to be East, West, North, South. Of course, we're also going to continue with our Paskong Pinoy tradition. So it's now a tradition for us. And then we're working with Barangay Banyuhay on Family Day. So we're providing the merchants for them. So that's me.
Thank you, Jade. Thank you so much for that and for sharing your journey. From try to settle down here in New Zealand, and then building your own community through your Filipino Children's Library, and and Batang Pinoy and Z events. And we look forward to all the events and the activities that you will be spearheading in the next years to come. And also, of course,
Thank you.
with some of those event partnering with us too.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we'll hear more from Jade later during the Q&A session. We still don't have Jan, so um we'll get Manolo on now. And hopefully Jan will be able to join us soon. So we are really lucky to have Manolo today. When I sent him the email a few months ago, I wasn't really expecting him to respond back, but he responded back. He sent back his response in within 30 minutes, and it just blew me away. So we are really pleased and honored that you are joining us today. Um, as most of you know here, he's the grandson of Manuel L. Quezon, the father of national language in the Philippines, because it was um, during his government that Filipino national language was established. Um, if you also don't know yet, so um, he has a rich career in media spanning decades. So he previously hosted The Explainer and The Explainer Dialogues on ANC Cable News. He's also an opinion and editorial writer. I think he just posted one last night for Inquirer. And he served as the head of Speakers Bureau, as columnist, an editorial writer, and an editorial of Philippine Daily Inquirer. Um, He's also a seasoned blogger and recipient of numerous accolades. He has been honored with the Palanca Award for Essay in English, twice named Opinion Writer of the Year by the Rotary Club of Manila's Journalism Awards, and received the Freedom Flame Award from the Frederick Naumann Foundation. In 2016, his contributions were further recognized with the Presidential Medal of Merit. He's also the executive director of Museo del Galion. Has that opened yet, Manolo?
Not yet.
I wasn't sure. But yeah, so it's his latest project. So let's give a warm welcome to Manolo Quezon. We'd love to hear about your stories about growing up as part of the Quezon household. What's the importance of the month of August for you? And your family, and how you're continuing the legacy of your grandfather, while you're with your family and with your community.
Thanks for having me. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you. Kwentuhan lang daw, so magkakwento lang ako. I didn't present one of my usual 1,000 slide PowerPoint presentations as a result, because I just wanted to talk to you from the heart, um, particularly because at this point in my life, my wife and I have moved to another country, and we brought our kids. So we're all in the same boat. We're all navigating a new landscape, trying to figure out who we are and how we can stay who we are, even as we raise a new generation and they discover who they are and what they want to be. In my case, I guess the whole question has always been that there were um, fixed dates in the calendar. For those of you who are already in August 1, right now, where we are, it's still July 31. August 1 marks the 80th anniversary of the uh, death of Manuel L. Quezon. So it's been practically three generations now since he was alive, and therefore we have reached the point where his life has already moved away from living memory. So what do we have left? Even for someone like me who's part of the family, um, all we have are little bits and pieces. We have memories, stories, books, articles, things that people have written. What I found the most interesting when I was trying to make sense of everything was something that Quezon said in 1937. That was the year that Tagalog was proclaimed the national language, or the basis of the national language. pambansang wika. And he said the main reason we want a national language is to end the era of divide and conquer. He said, I often wonder now that we are about to be independent, because by then, in 1937, we were already 2 years into the Commonwealth, and it was almost sure that by 1946 we would be independent. And so he said, I often wonder what will happen when we become independent and the pressure or even the ambition to become a free country is finally achieved. Are we going to start fighting again with each other? Tagalogs against Cebuanos, Cebuanos against Ilonggos, Kapampangans versus Ilocanos, and so on, the way we used to fight when we were students here. He was speaking at his alma mater, which was Letran in Manila. And that made me realize that if you go on YouTube, you will find one of the few recordings of Quezon that survives. It's called Message to My People from 1922. And if you listen to it, there's one part in his speech that always always made me sort of wonder, because at one point he goes, the Philippines are a great country. And I said, bakit niya sinabi yun? I said, we all know he learned English late, so mali-mali lang ba yung English niya? But then, when I started reading around, I realized that there's sort of a dividing line. Before, let's say, 1935, people said the Philippines are. After 1935, people started saying the Philippines is. There's a very big difference between the two. Some of you who are maybe a little older, or who remember the American bases, they up to the end of the American bases, they still referred to our part of the world as PI, Philippine Islands. I mean, that's very revealing, because that was their name for us. And it tells you it's a collection of separate places. That is, the Philippines are. It's a group of different islands. When the Filipinos got together and said we ought to be an independent country, they themselves decided the Philippines is one country. Even though up to now, we still have to figure out what that is really is about. And that includes language. Language was supposed to fulfill a practical need, which is that however much you tried, the languages that I am using now with you and my parents' generation used among themselves, which was Spanish, were foreign languages. It gave us a very big advantage. As you yourselves, as residents of New Zealand, have experienced up to now, it gave us the advantage of being comfortable, aware, and part of a much bigger world. It made us open to ideas and able to communicate and translate those ideas into our own way of thinking and dialogue with others. But sometimes it would lead to us not being able to communicate with each other. Up to today, things such as class, social status, determines what language you use and you're comfortable with, and your ability to really understand or not understand those who are also Filipinos like you. Over time, we have gone from exclusion to inclusion. As the introduction today showed to us, we are now much more aware of, respectful of, caring about our other local languages. They're not just dialects anymore. They are proudly, properly, and undoubtedly languages with their own histories, their own worldviews. The question then is, can we still have a language that can unite us for a practical purpose, as well as a means to live up to, live with, and enjoy the languages of our homes and hearths? And that is the challenge you are living through every day. If I go back to that 1937 speech of my grandfather's at Letran, what struck me was um, he put it this way. He said, number one, we are not going to abandon Spanish because Spanish is the language of Rizal, of the Enlightenment, the language in many ways of the propaganda movement that made us a country. It opens us to a whole part of the world that is important. We are not going to abandon English because it connects us to the democratic world and makes us a part of the modern world. But we will also develop Filipino because, literally, as the saying goes, from apari to holo, we need a way to talk to each other. And our subsequent generations have added to that and said, we cannot let our languages, our local languages, go extinct. So imagine that from the very beginning up to today, the expectation is that the average Filipino is and will always be a multilingual person. Imagine what that says about our abilities and our self perception of our competencies. That we can take this for granted when this is actually perhaps quite rare in the world or not as common as you might think. So, where does that leave us at this point? You and I, and in many ways, this is what being Filipino is about. Um, I think as we go over time, we discover that what is official is less important and less relevant than what is instinctive. Um, just a while ago, you heard about adobo, and I was struck. There was a very famous saying of the um, French hero and President Charles de Gaulle, who once said in exasperation, "How can you expect to govern a country that has 365 different kinds of cheese? How can you expect to unite a people that has 2,742 types of adobo?" And yet, it unites us. We have learned to embrace the diversity and yet recognize the commonality. That is what makes us us. It makes us realize that presidents come and go, governments can change, decrees can be issued and ignored. But what are the things that will actually promote our communication with each other? Our national language became a reality not because of anything any government did, but because of the mass media. Because the mass media recognized, thrived on, and achieved what a national language is supposed to do: link us together in community. And the same way, it's music and food that come first in any gathering of Filipinos, whether of the family or of a community. And it's what survives all the many separations. You know the saying that whenever you gather three Filipinos in one place, you will have three different Filipino organizations. And yet, they will find a chance to have peace, joy, laughter, and fellowship if there is music and there's food, and both involve a shared language just as much as it requires a shared culture and palate. So, this is why I was excited to have a chance to talk to you today. I don't know if this is a place where we're going to come up with answers. It is a place where we are coming up with that sense that is so rare and so, in many ways, so needed by us of community, that we are all worrying about, will our children understand us? Will they understand their relatives when there are reunions? Will they have that sense of love and longing for the places we left, and are wanting to find ways to make that possible? I personally believe it starts with what we eat. I believe it comes next with what we listen to. And then comes the chance for us to be able to read and converse. I've personally found that, like so many children of their background, our kids became more appreciative of Filipino once they were outside the Philippines. It reinforces the links with each other, with their parents, and with what makes us us, wherever we may be in this world. Um, so growing up as a Quezon is like growing up like you, except perhaps I had to do a little more research about it, because um, we had to go to a lot of ceremonies, and I, for one, wanted to know why we were there. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized a lot of the things we took um, as a given actually wasn't the case. Those who had decided on a national language were more open minded and more welcoming of the outside world than many defenders of a national language are today. And many people who are dealing with what to do with language could learn from this attitude of embracing the world instead of hiding from it, and of using our language as just one of many ways to put a little less loneliness in the world when you're a Filipino out there engaging and trying to find a better world for yourself. Thank you.
You're on mute, Becky. Can you hear me?
Hello, I'm on mute.
Yes, yes.
Did you hear me earlier?
No.
Hopefully I was speaking, I was talking to myself, so I sorry, so I was telling Manolo that he gave a very insightful talk, and we are going to take away so many things from what he shared with us earlier, but it also provides the best segue to introduce Jan, our next speaker, who will be talking about raising bilingual children in the diaspora. So Jan is a nurse. She's a nurse, and she wears many hats. Apart from that, she's also a devoted mother. She's passionate about passing on her Filipino heritage, and she loves teaching her Kiwi toddler the Bisaya language. She's the visionary behind the Filipino bilingual parenting Facebook group. If you're not part of that group yet, please look it up on Facebook and join. And it is a thriving community where parents and caregivers come together to connect and support one another. But that's not all. She's also an accomplished author and illustrator of children's books. Look it up on Amazon. Her works are on there. Um, and in Bisaya and Tagalog, celebrating bilingualism and the richness of our cultural heritage. So, welcome, Jan, and we're looking forward to hearing from you about what your tips and tricks are for raising bilingual kids in families and communities in the diaspora.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? All right. So today I'm going to talk to you about raising bilingual children in the diaspora. So diaspora is a people spread out from their homeland. Disclaimer, I'm sharing insights from my own experiences, books, podcasts, and other sources, and I'm only offering ideas for you to consider. Always choose what works best for you and your family, and if you have any concerns about your child's development, please consult a healthcare professional. Next. I am Jan, originally from Cebu, and I've been in New Zealand for 14 years. I am a nurse by trade, but more importantly, a mama. Me and my Kiwi husband have a 3-year-old daughter, and I have founded the Filipino Bilingual Parenting Facebook group to connect and get support from each other in raising Filipino kids in the diaspora. I have also authored and illustrated a couple of children's books in Bisaya and Tagalog. This topic is very important to me, especially since becoming a mom. Being a Filipino is part of my identity and my daughter's too. So speaking our dialect helps her connect with herself, me, and our extended family. And there are many benefits to speaking Filipino. It empowers us and makes us feel at home with fellow Filipinos. Language plays a crucial role in preserving our culture. All right, before we dive into the how, let's first acknowledge the challenges of raising bilingual children. Living outside the Philippines means our environment is dominated by a different language. In New Zealand, that is English. And media content is predominantly in English as well. It becomes convenient to use English all the time. However, here's the thing that confuses me. Why do Filipinos, even in the Philippines, often speak to little kids in English? It seems like an automatic response. But why is that? If you know why, put it in the comments. And the next. Living in a different country, we strive to preserve our culture while adapting to the host country's culture. Generational cultural differences can also be quite significant. Like in my time, it was Parokya and Edgar, and now it's all about Bini, if you know them. So in my opinion, having Filipino parents can make raising bilingual children easier. However, being in a mixed race relationship like I am in adds more challenges to it. And also, access to cultural events has been limited, but thanks to people like Jade, we're seeing an increase here in Auckland, which is fantastic. I'm not sure about other cities though. And then another major challenge is access to Filipino-based resources. I find this really, really challenging. It's not just about finding educational materials, there's also limited media content in Tagalog, let alone Filipino dialects. Community support is also scarce, with few language classes, mainly online, and limited cultural events that offer exposure to the language and culture. All right, so we've covered the challenges. Now, let's look at the things that we need to consider and have at the back of our minds. I discovered the importance of setting goals just last year, and it would have been incredibly helpful to know this before starting bilingual parenting. Setting goals helps establish realistic expectations and understand the effort required to raise a bilingual child. So what are you expecting from your child? Is that one, they understand both but speak only one? This is quite common for kids raised in the diaspora. 2 is that they understand and participate in everyday topics. So this is more challenging as it requires the child to converse in Filipino. 3 is that they speak both languages fluently. This involves consistent practice and exposure to both languages. And 4 is that they're fluent in both languages. This is what I call A+ in bilingual parenting. And it's my ultimate goal, but I'd be more than happy if my daughter Jessie could participate in everyday conversations in Filipino, which she can't at the moment. And next is, before anything else, consider these questions. How much time and effort are you willing to invest? Parenting is challenging enough, as we all know, and it can be difficult to speak Filipino if you're accustomed to English, and if you're surrounded by English-speaking people. Personally, I really struggled during the first 3 months and often finding it hard to recall Bisaya words and defaulting to English. However, I kept reminding myself to speak Bisaya until I became more comfortable using it. And another thing to consider is, what kind of support will you get? Personally, I am fortunate that my husband wanted Jessie to learn Bisaya as well. Initially, I felt really awkward because he and his family couldn't understand what I was saying to Jessie because I was speaking in Bisaya. And then also speaking to Jessie in the community in Bisaya also made me really self-conscious. However, I just kept persevering and grew more comfortable. I received many compliments for teaching Jessie Bisaya, and now I feel proud and at ease speaking it. And my husband has also picked up many Bisaya words along the way and frequently uses it with her. All right, so next is, so you might be wondering, how often should you speak to your child in Filipino to ensure that they understand or speak it? Experts suggest that there should be exposure to the language for at least 30% of their waking time. And it's not just about letting them watch teleseries or cartoons in Tagalog or Filipino, but about engaging in rich interactions such as discussing your day, telling stories, and having meaningful conversations. And for kids to speak Filipino, there must be a genuine need for them to use the language. In this regard, I particularly envy families where both parents are Filipinos and have grandparents or Filipino grandparents around, as this creates an ideal environment for language use. For me, I remind Jessie, pag binasaya, bi kay wa ko kasabot. So I tell her, speak in Bisaya because I don't understand you. But sometimes, I don't even notice that she's talking to me in English and I respond easily in Bisaya. And also, I found this that a good tip on teaching kids to read in another language is that it's better to start with a language that's harder to read. So in our case, English, we teach English first because it has silent letters and other complexities. And the next is living in a different country. We strive to preserve. Oh, sorry, wrong page. I'll go back. All right. So another thing is always be consistent in using the Filipino language. If you're in an English-dominated country, kids are always going to learn English regardless. So focus on using Filipino. Credits to my husband for this because he wanted me to highlight this. So speak in Filipino, think in Filipino. All right, the next question is, when do you start? The answer is always the sooner the better, or simply now. It's helpful to consider the stages of development as outlined by the Montessori principles. So from 0 to 6 years old, this is the absorbent mind and their brain is like a sponge. This is the best time to immerse them in all things Filipino. And 6 to 12 years old is the conscious imagination and where they become conscious learners. They choose what they want to learn and learn primarily through memorization and direct teaching. For me, I started talking to my little one in Filipino while she was still in the womb. So now, here's how we do it and how we can make it easier. So you don't have to worry about 30% exposure during waking time. Just speak Filipino all the time. If that feels overwhelming and you're just starting out, so you can set specific times to speak Filipino, like during meals, and then gradually increase it from there. And find other Filipinos and encourage to speak only in Filipino, especially when the kids are around. And what I also do is pretend I don't understand my kid when she speaks English. Also, it helps if you force yourself to think in Filipino most of the time. So think in Filipino. That's also my tip. And then immerse your household in everything Filipino. Books, shows, videos, music, OPM. OPM is an awesome way to introduce language and culture. Think Sarah G, Bamboo, Beanie. It doesn't have to be all about children's stuff. It's important that you also enjoy what you are doing and teaching your kids. Sometimes I just belt out OPM songs in the car with Jessie. And one thing I also do is make Wednesdays our official Everything Tagalog Day because we also have our playgroup then at that time. So any songs or videos that we watch, it's all in Tagalog. Next is, and when I didn't have many Filipino books then, I translated any book into Bisaya or Tagalog, which has become a habit. It can be tiring too, so I prefer using Filipino books when possible and bought heaps of them. And also I made some. And then think back to the folk tales you used to know and tell stories like Alamat ng Pinya. Sometimes it can feel a bit gory, but you can also create your own books. And it doesn't have to be fancy. You can use pen and paper. You can also use flashcards and posters, and you can make it or buy it. I sell them, by the way. And to make learning fun, play games in Filipino or traditional Filipino games like sungka and jackstone, and then speak in Filipino when you're playing it. And the next is we Filipinos love celebrations, right? So use this to your advantage. When you cook a Filipino dish, involve the kids and use it as an opportunity to speak to them in Filipino. Celebrate Filipino holidays and join community events to expose them to both the culture and the language. So the bilingual parenting group for Filipinos. Thank you to Rhoda for the logo for our parenting group. So I established this group in 2021 after learning about a Vietnamese bilingual parenting group on Facebook. And that group had active parents seeking support and sharing resources. So I thought that was a clever idea. And then I found it difficult to find resources and support for Filipinos, so I decided to create our own group. And we've had a few Filipinos ask for support or advice in the group, but I think everyone is still warming up. I've also tried reaching out to experts like Filipino speech language therapists who might be able to help on the page as well. So don't be shy, post your questions or anything on there. So before I end, so be consistent, speak and think in Filipino. You can do it. We can do it together, and use the Facebook group for online support. And then salamat for listening to my insights, and I hope you've gained something from this and feel inspired to preserve our language and culture in the diaspora. And the resources are next. So these are the books that I've read and past podcasts and websites that I have read. And if you want, and join now, and you can scan the QR code there to join the Facebook group. Just make sure you answer the questions. And that's me.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. Maraming salamat. I think, yeah, I think that's the best ending for like the topic, to wrap it all up, and then it gives us something to take away and try to practice, because I myself, I'm very guilty of not speaking to my child in Filipino, because yeah, I think in English and Filipino sometimes, so it's very
Yeah.
hard. I find it very challenging, but
Yeah.
I think the tips that you shared with us today will help with, slowly integrating that into our household over time. Cross fingers.
Yeah, because someone
So
someone actually asked me like you're bilingual or multilingual. Like, how do you think? Like, do you think in Tagalog? Do you think? I was like,
mm,
and that got me thinking. I'm like, oh yeah. And then I realized that I think in English all the time. And then I'm like, why am I thinking in English? I'm not even talking to anyone. Like, I can just think in
yeah,
Bisaya. Like,
yes, yes,
yeah,
that's true. I find
yeah,
yeah, I find that I do that too, especially
yeah,
when my child was very young. I still, yeah, it's all English and not Filipino. But anyway, thank you so much to the three of you. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And I think we can squeeze in one question from our audience. And I'll bring in RM. She had she sent through a question when she registered for the event. RM, do you want to ask your question now?
Ah, yes. Okay. So this is something that I've been seeing a lot online, but I'm curious about what do you think about shifting from buwan ng wika to buwan ng mga wika?
So yeah, so I think right now our focus is like buwan ng wika, like one language for the Filipino people. But I think RM is trying to ask the question about the possibility of actually making it more inclusive, and make it a celebration of buwan ng mga wika, or Filipino language, or like Filipino languages month. Thank you, RM. Who would like to start responding
Well,
to
let
that
me
question?
let me start
Yes.
because I think this is a case where you shouldn't wait. If you feel strongly about it, then you should pioneer it here in New Zealand. Jan is a very good example of how you can do it. and just do it. Don't wait for anyone, because I'll tell you why. At home, we still don't know what we want to do. Just recently, there was a big review of our educational system, because, as you know, our educational system is going from bad to worse. And so there are all these discussions, ano bang gagawin, ano bang dapat gawin. And one of the experiments that was begun a few decades ago was the idea of teaching in the mother language. In other words, yung the first few years, dapat sa lengguwahe ninyo sa inyong rehiyon or whatever. Di ba? And that seems to be, you would think that that is just sort of a very basic thing to do. But officially, the decision made by the Department of Education is it doesn't work. We're not going to do it. We're going to go back and refocus. Not maybe not even in Filipino, but in English. There's many reasons for it. Some are more complicated than we think. One main reason is, even if you wanted to teach in the mother language, walang material, walang materiales, walang may kapasidad. Because in some places the language is disappearing and dying out. So there's a bigger problem than you even realize. So if you're going to do that, don't waste, don't wait, because God knows we don't know what to do about it at home. I was plugging in the chat. We do a show called Proyecto Filipino, and it's a civics program, and I'm plugging it because we talk about these questions. For me, it struck home when I realized that our national anthem was written in Spanish. For many of you, your parents learned it in English. For many of us, we sang it in Tagalog. But if you are Cebuano, it's illegal for you to sing it in your language. And I'm like, why is that? And it's also, by the way, illegal to sing it in the original language, which is Spanish. And it's also illegal to sing it in English. And yet that is the language that the generation that fought in Bataan sang. So, alam mo, merong problema na minsan masyadong makitid talaga ang kaisipan. And that comes from when you're trying to do something wholesale. You don't do anything wholesale here in New Zealand. Your worry is your town, your neighborhood, your neighbors, your family. So just go ahead and do it, and you'll be surprised. That's how minds get to open up.
Thank you, Manolo. Jan, do you have any thoughts?
I think that's a great idea. And then we can also find representation for all the other dialects. Yeah, because one thing I realized when I was teaching Jessie Bisaya, that because it would be more helpful if she knows Tagalog, because Tagalog is our national language, and I myself, I'm not very good at it. I'm probably better at English than Tagalog, so I feel a bit guilty, but I'm trying my best to ensure that she learns Bisaya so I can speak with her, and then Tagalog as well, because that's our national language. But it can sometimes be draining. But if we have this Buwan ng Wika, then the other dialects also get representation when we say Buwan ng Wika. And it's not just about Tagalog, but celebrating the different dialects in the Philippines. And yeah, we can start, like, maybe Becky can change it to Buwan ng Wika, Buwan ng mga Wika instead of Buwan ng Wika.
Takes notes. We can definitely take note of that. Yeah, because I think it's also becomes more inclusive, and we don't we don't just focus on Tagalog as one of the languages of the Philippines, but also celebrate the other languages in the different regions across the country, and all these regions are well represented anywhere we go in the Philippines, including here in New Zealand. Jade, did you have any thoughts about celebrating Buwan ng mga Wika instead of Buwan ng Wika?
Yeah, as others have said, I just go for it. It's more inclusive. It's a better way to do things. And yeah, I think that's just how it is. Just go for it.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
RM. Yeah, thank you for your question, RM, and thank you again to our speakers. Thank you for spending this last hour with us. And hopefully for our audience, hopefully you've picked up a thing or two from the different topics that were discussed today. And again, I'd like to thank our sponsors again: Orbit Remit, Aroha, New Zealand Immigration Services, and Ministry of Ethnic for Migrant Communities for supporting Banyuhay Aotearoa so that we can host events like this one, and we hopefully we can do more of this and get more people together to have these kinds of discussions, within our community here in New Zealand. And then for everyone, I think Manolo, you wanted to plug something else as well, a YouTube channel.
No, I plugged it already. Please Google
Okay.
Proyecto Filipino on YouTube, and please give our show a chance, and maybe you'll find it relevant to your lives and those that you care about. Thanks.
Thank you, Manolo. And don't forget to join, if you haven't joined the Filipino Bilingual Parenting Group yet, please join that group as well, and be part of that community. Be an active member of the community and contribute or ask questions that you may have, because that's how we, keep the movement alive. And also look forward to the events that are coming up by Batang Pinoy NZ and Banyuhay Aotearoa in the coming months. Again, thank you to everyone. Maraming salamat. Ngamihi nui. Thank you very much. And we hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.